Hey guys, thank you so much for joining me in another video. So today I wanted to talk about a major fashion icon I think of, especially the mid-late 2000s. And I think she's always had incredible style, but she's had such a major moment recently, and I'm talking about Lily Allen. As a teenager growing up in the mid-late 2000s as a millennial, I really enjoyed following her music. And those that remember, she wasn't just a pop star, she was the look. Bangs, the beehive hair, the baby doll dresses with the sneakers, and of course the Chanel bags. We're going to talk about the bags, we'll talk about her style, but she was definitely one of Karl Lagerfeld's muses, and honestly such a moment in fashion. And I think Karl at the time, even well into his 70s, he still understood that there was this new younger crowd, the hipster, the indie online generation, that didn't want this look of very glam perfection. Lily Allen was kind of the perfect muse for that. The way she wore Chanel, it was in this very like fun, eclectic way that I think really did speak to this hipster style. And I think about how a lot of these kinds of like indie gals really like to wear Chanel. There was something about like the style of the bags, that kind of like vintagey look that really hit at the time. Again, I think Lily Allen captured that kind of late 2000s and into the early 2010s style. It was very eclectic, bright colors, bold prints, all about vintage. And there was also this DIY energy. Again, it wasn't about looking perfect. It was about expressing yourself. I think of her as someone that also captured this kind of look that was very popular in online spaces, from MySpace to Tumblr. She'd wear tulle prom dresses with sneakers, a Chanel jacket with a fur trapper hat. It was girly, but there was still this like grittiness. She still had this like sweetsy side to her, but then she was also a little scrappy looking. She kind of, I think, was part of this wave of like really cool British girls. Think of like Amy Winehouse, Florence Welch, Alexa Chung, that had this girly feminine side, but it was also gritty. They also took inspiration from vintage fashion, thrift stores. Again, it was part of this like cultural movement that was happening in very online spaces that I think became very mainstream because of these cool it girls. And during this time, there was a convergence of different styles. I even feel like the terms hipster or indie sleaze never feel 100% right when describing her style. There were a multitude of different points of inspiration that were going on. There was this twee aesthetic, and it was very rooted in nostalgia, was very youthful, and there was this heavy use of like vintage and retro styles. Think about like the 50s and 60s, this like vintage retro revival that was going on. Think about the styles of Amy Winehouse to Dita Von Teese. There was this fascination with pinup style, this rockabilly look, this fascination with figures like Betty Page and 1950s kitsch aesthetics. A few years later, we would see like the epic rise of someone like Lana Del Rey, who really leaned into that Priscilla Presley look. Again, I don't want to say Lily Allen's style was necessarily like hipster or indie sleaze. Like, sure, she was of that era. She was very much on MySpace. She was very present on that platform. But again, it was like a convergence of a variety of different styles and points of inspiration that she adopted, as well as many others. I don't want to just like limit her to this hipster girl, especially because over time her style has evolved. But I think it was more so how she mixed these hyper feminine aesthetics, this 50s look or these doll-like looks, with like street style. It's more in how she mixed things up and made it her own. And of course, her being a Chanel girly, Karl featured her in campaigns and shows, personally photographed her, and she just embodied that current Chanel girl. And that's why I think this era was so interesting. It was playful, girly, bow-filled, accessorized. It spoke to like the vintage aesthetics, but it could still feel eclectic. That was very much the look. Like, you didn't want things to look so formal and matchy-matchy. You wanted tension. One bag that I think is very signature to her and like this line in general, it's the Coco Cocoon bags and this whole line. Like, these are these puffy bags, super soft, lightweight, but Lily Allen, of course, carried it everywhere. She wore it on this campaign, and it has this sort of like signature Karl monochromatic style. Reminds me again of like very vintage Audrey Hepburn, Breakfast at Tiffany's with the sunglasses, the tiara. When Karl took these photos of her, he said, "I love Lily Allen. She looks a lot like Gabrielle Chanel, and she's a self-made woman. She is cool and extremely witty." And again, that was classic Karl, a mashup of vintage and pop cultural references and humor. And again, it just worked so well with Lily Allen. The fact that she had this humorous side, Carl also had that. You believed her as a Chanel girl. And I feel like sometimes I'll see Chanel on like a celebrity and it just doesn't like match, because I think, again, it doesn't have that humorous exchange. But these bags, they were reversible, could be turned inside out. And again, she would wear them in like funkier ways. And you could imagine yourself wearing this with a fun baby doll dress, or like with jeans and sneakers. Less of a ladies who lunch kind of way, or less of a Nancy Reagan way. It just felt Chanel could be cool and young and fresh. And I think she had that energy. And then also her music just also really aligned. Like her brand, her aesthetic, this kind of like baby doll vintage look, like that was so her. It just fits so well with the Chanel world. Another bag that she famously wore that we're also seeing is the Chanel bow bag. Chanel actually re-released this bag recently. It's very lily coated and it's literally shaped like a bow, girly, cute, kind of doll-like, in this tongue-in-cheek kind of way. Here she is seen wearing it in 2024. So again, it just shows how like cyclical this kind of style is. The bow as a motif was part of her signature. Again, she wore bows in her hair, her dresses, even her shoes. And again, there was like this time in the late 2000s, this like baby doll look. It's definitely had like little like moments of resurgence. This was more of this hyper feminine look, but it was very twee. And again, the way she would kind of dress it down, she would wear a dress with sneakers or pearls with a hoodie. This becomes her way of saying, yes, she's girly, but on her own terms. And instead of a bow being like this prim and proper kind of thing, it always felt exaggerated, more like tongue-in-cheek. And I think fast forward today, I recently talked about this in another video, we're seeing this kind of like modern bow revival where they're back, be it in fashion or in accessories. But for Lily, this is not a trend. Like, this is literally her style. Like, we've been seeing her wear this forever, and it's playful, it's nostalgic, it nods to her fashion at the past. It's how she dresses now. Like, this is just her style. Being a Chanel girly, she has such an extensive Chanel collection, like iconic Chanel hula hoop flap. She also carried this Chanel Star Attitude grommet flap, which is again a little bit edgier with like the studded hardware, but the way she's styling it, she's smoking a cigarette and she just looks really cute here. Here she's wearing this Chanel jacket and this fur trapper hat. Chanel again was one of these brands that had approval of the hipster millennial back in the day, and I think being like cool with this kind of indie crowd definitely had this trickle effect. But again, Chanel during this time, it was a brand that the hipster girls especially really liked, be it in like a contemporary way or be it in a way where you wore vintage. Here she is wearing this Chanel striped camera bag, this ombre minaudiere. There was also like this side of her style where she would color coordinate her bags with her accessories, or in this case, her hair. Again, she was someone who really played with her hair, and also this look of like dyeing your hair like fun colors was a way of expressing yourself. It may not look so formal, but it was definitely fun. Here she's wearing this Chanel rectangular bowling bag. Here she has this very iconic oversized heart bag. She had an assortment of seasonal flat bags. And again, these flat bags felt uniquely her. And again, the way she also would color coordinate these bags with her looks. And here she is with this Chanel brick flap with these bright colors, this transparent boy brick clutch, these layered metallic crossbody bags, this trompe l'oeil boy bag. You've got the full Chanel look with the bow in her hair. We've seen a revival of this coquette thing, but back in the day it was more like this baby doll thing. Like, think of other brands like Marc Jacobs to Betsy Johnson. They kind of also had this baby doll look that was very also informed by like 50s, early 60s kinds of aesthetics. Here she's wearing the Chanel jumbo flap. So the style back in the day was you could wear these like smaller mini flaps, of course, but there was something about the jumbo bag that was like really cool. It's also interesting because Mathieu Blazy is bringing a lot of these bigger flap styles back, more in like these suede iterations that look slouchier. And here she looks quite like nice and put together, but then you could also wear Chanel in this more street style kind of way with this beanie and sunglasses. Here she is earlier this year wearing this Chanel mini. So again, she has like a multitude of Chanel bags and she continues to wear them for decades. And then here she is wearing the reissue, another icon, against this bright pink coat. Something about the pink and black also was very of that era. It felt very like mid late 2000s, like felt very Lily Allen, but it could also be Christina Aguilera. It could also be like Scene Kid. There's something about this like pink black combination was really prevalent. Here she's got the Chanel reissue in this bright patent red, again coordinating her bag with her lipstick here, these Ray-Bans, this kind of like beehive hairdo, very like Audrey Hepburn energy. Here she's got this tricolor reissue. Also, again, these pale pastel colors felt so in line with this kind of style of Chanel, but also very Lily Allen. I could keep going, but she has had worn so many Chanel bags. I could keep going on and on about Chanel bags, but she's worn Chanel bags over the years, and it's definitely, when I think of her style, like the brand that comes to mind is Chanel. Another thing I also wanted to mention is she's also had her own personal lines. She's had the Lily Loves line, so she launched this in 2007. Again, this was during that period of the 2000s when a lot of celebrities were creating their own fashion lines. Madonna, Jessica Simpson, Beyonce, J-Lo, Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen. Her own line here, Lily Loves, it expressed this love of dresses. She would describe herself as a dressaholic. Again, a lot of these bustier dresses that had a little bit of definition at the bust, but then had more of a baby doll flow to them. And often they were in really pretty colors, floral patterns, pastels, lots of tools. Another thing I also want to mention is Lily Allen, early 2010s, she also ran her own vintage shop with her sister Sarah Owen. With that, she came across so many vintage pieces that she described as, quote, if only pieces. This from a Teen Vogue article. Through months of buying for the shop, we came across so many if only pieces, Sarah says. If only this was a nicer material, if only this had an embellishment here. We saw so many things that were nearly on the money, and we thought that with a bit of updating and tweaking, we could create the perfect vintage inspired outfit. And we came across some things that were so brilliant, it was a shame to have them only in one size. Then in 2011, they launched their vintage inspired fashion line under the name Lucy in Disguise. So the collection featured designs that were inspired by vintage fashion pieces that they discovered. And you definitely see how Lily Allen, her own style, you definitely see those 1950s, even like early 60s aesthetics and like the hair. Even if I think of like the design and like the pop design aesthetics of like the 50s and 60s, think also pop art aesthetics were very much a thing with this early like hipster look. Also the bangs, the headbands, the hair accessories, the more playful and the more kitschy, the better. Also these like peep toe heels were very much a thing. When it came to colors, of course, I think pinks, pastels, candy colors, pinks and blacks, contrasting but like poppy colors that felt quite harmonious were very much a thing. A bit of a different look from the mid 2000s was this boho style. This was a breakaway from that. And also I think this idea of contrast different looks, wearing like a 50s looking dress with like a cap or hoodie or sneakers. She didn't just wear Chanel, like she definitely wore a lot of other brands, a lot of vintage. She also wore Hermes. Here she is wearing this neon Birkin perfectly with these pom-poms. Recently she was seen wearing this mini Kelly. Last year this Birkin 35. Or maybe this is a 40, like this looks quite big. Here she is wearing this furry, very over-the-top furry Fendi peekaboo. She also wore Givenchy. This is the Lucrezia. Also love this with this bright pink coat. Like again, pink coats, bright pink colors. There's also this Givenchy Nightingale, another iconic bag. Here she is wearing the Chanel Mademoiselle bowling bag, the Coco Cabas tote with the Antigona. Here she is wearing the Saint Laurent downtown bag, again with like the matching gingham pattern with the matching shoes. Here she's wearing this Saint Laurent classic duffel. Here she is wearing this Marc Jacobs Hudson. From Mulberry, she's wearing this blue leopard print Mulberry Bayswater. Also something of this period, something about wearing these leopard prints in red or pink, blue, or like metallics. It was like very much a thing. Even if I look at some of her styles more recently, she continues on this playful side, like this Puppets and Puppets cookie bag that she wore earlier this year. She was seen recently wearing this Vivienne Westwood heart-shaped bag. So yeah, again, I think there are aspects of her style that continuously reference the eclectic style of vintage and her love for bows. But I think in recent years, there is definitely like a sleeker, more sensual side to some of her looks. A lot of looks that are quite revealing, very sexy, very different from the girly 50s look she was going for, like definitely a lot more skin, some of these more recent looks. And of course, Lily Allen is having a comeback now. Of course, musically, she has a new album. Of course, there's been more going on with her personal life in a public way and her divorce, but also stylistically, it's fascinating to look at her evolution, look at how her style has matured, but also still stayed the same. Like she still carries on with a lot of these more eclectic motifs. It's interesting how we talk about fashion being very cyclical, and right now we're in the middle of this 20-year style loop. We're seeing a lot of the styles that defined the mid to late 2000s are already coming back in like a big way, like the bows. I don't know if we're quite seeing doll looks, but we're already seeing like hints of some of these more like girly looks. But looking back at her style, like there's definitely the way she dressed in the late 2000s, I could absolutely see coming back with this nostalgia balanced with a little bit of rebellion. What I always liked about her style is it never felt overly styled or over thought out. She could just walk out with like a tulle prom dress and sneakers, wearing a Chanel bag, and it just like looked right. Like it was very eclectic, and that was very much on purpose, but it also felt very real. And I think that's why people liked her style. And even now when she wears something like the Chanel bow bag or like a Vivienne Westwood heart bag, it doesn't feel like she is chasing the trend, like she is the look. But now we're seeing it on like a woman who's grown up, she's lived and she's evolved, and she's still the same person, but she's now in a different chapter of her life. And of course with the new album, I think that's what makes her such a great style icon. I just love how that she's never lost her edge. So yeah, while Lily Allen's return feels very nostalgic to me, it also feels quite refreshing. Like it reminds me of a time where fashion wasn't about the algorithm, fashion wasn't about market data. And I also loved the contrast of fashion that could be equally like romantic, but also weird and random and also very expressive. Anyways, guys, that's my video for today. Thank you so much for joining me in another one, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.